You don't belong in this frame anymore. It's time for a new vibe. Those were the exact words my daughter-in-law whispered to me with a sugary smile right in front of my husband's colleagues during our wedding anniversary dinner. The digital frame, a gift from my late husband that once sat in our living room displaying decades of our family memories, now flashed pastel pink quotes like, "Let go. The ocean knows. And be the breeze, not the burden." It was as though I'd died, and she'd already replaced my tombstone with a motivational poster from a coastal yoga retreat. If you've ever seen a woman get erased from her own family, quietly, image by image, smile by smile, stay with me to the very end, and comment below with the city you're watching from. Has something like this ever happened around you? And please, if you believe in giving voice to women who've been silenced, hit subscribe. It matters more than you know. That night wasn't just a dinner. It was the first family event I had been invited to in months. I say invited in quotes because the invitation came from a mass group chat buried under birthday wishes for the baby and reminders about sunscreen. It was my husband's retirement anniversary, the man who'd built this house with his bare hands. The man who'd passed 2 winters ago, but still filled every corner of the home through the frame of memories he'd left behind. Until now. When I walked into the dining room, I noticed the frame wasn't on the console table anymore. Instead, a stack of linen napkins and a seashell lamp had taken its place. That was the first pang. But it wasn't until my daughter-in-law made her speech this year, "We're refreshing our family space with new energy," that I realized what was happening. She tapped the TV, and the screen lit up with rotating quotes on beaches waves and finding your higher self. No pictures of my late husband. No photos of my son as a boy. No Christmas mornings. No 4th of July barbecues. No me. I waited, thinking it might be a slideshow she'd prefaced too dramatically. But it wasn't. It was permanent. After the applause, I quietly asked her where the family slideshow had gone. She said it was cluttering the vibe. "We're moving forward now, not backward." Then came the smile. That same tight, smooth-lipped smile she gives when she hands me a plastic fork at Thanksgiving. I stood still. My son didn't say a word. My granddaughter was scrolling through her phone. Everyone just moved on. And in that moment, I realized something bone deep. I wasn't part of the family aesthetic anymore. Let me tell you who I was before I became someone to delete. I was the one who taught my son to ride a bike without training wheels, bandaged every scrape, and read Little House on the Prairie until I lost my voice. I hosted every birthday party from ages 1 to 12 in that house. I baked the sheet cakes, blew up the balloons. I even helped him buy the engagement ring for the woman who now calls my presence visual noise. After my husband died, I thought we'd be closer, me and her. I moved into the guest room for a few months to help with the newborn. I folded laundry at midnight. I read bedtime stories, even when my hands ached. I never asked for thanks. And yet, now I stood under fairy lights in my own backyard, surrounded by people I barely recognized being politely deleted. Not yelled at, not insulted. Deleted, replaced, whited out. Have you ever experienced something similar? When did you realize you were being erased, not violently but quietly, elegantly through omission? Please, I'm asking you to share your experience in the comments. I want others to know they're not alone. After the party, I went to my room. Yes, my room in the basement now, and powered up the old digital frame. Blank. Factory reset. I didn't know much about tech, but I knew it had once stored over 2,000 photos. Trips, holidays, silly selfies with my husband in front of diners and gas stations. Gone. Instead, a new folder sat on the memory card labeled "Clean Frame, Approved." Inside, 12 JPEGs of minimalist beach quotes in turquoise and white. That was it. I stared at them one by one. You can't heal in the place that broke you. Sunsets are proof that endings can be beautiful. Let go of the weight you weren't meant to carry. Were these for me? Messages dressed as decor. Suddenly, I remembered something my husband had given me that frame for our 40th anniversary. He said, "Now we'll never have to miss a moment. This is our moving album." And now I had been erased from it. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my chair with the frame glowing blue and white like a soft electric ghost, whispering that I no longer belonged here. In the morning, I asked my son directly, "Did you know she deleted all the photos?" He looked guilty, not surprised, just tired. "Mum, we just wanted to declutter. Too many sad reminders. It wasn't personal." Not personal. What's more personal than erasing someone's memories, days past? The house got quieter. I wasn't asked to watch the baby anymore. My cooking suggestions were brushed off. One afternoon, I overheard my daughter-in-law on a call with her sister. "Yeah, I cleared the whole frame. She didn't even back them up. Who keeps only one copy of their life?" And then she laughed. That laugh. That laugh made me freeze like a bird sensing an earthquake before it hits. Because it told me something this wasn't accidental. She wanted me gone. Not dead, not homeless, but forgotten. Bit by bit, moment by moment, she was making sure no one would remember I was ever here. I tried to print out some old photos. I even called Walgreens. But the files were all on that frame, not my phone, not my laptop. I'd always assumed it was safe. That's the danger, isn't it? Trusting the wrong person to guard your history. Have you ever lost your memories, not to age, not to fire or flood, but to someone else's decision that you no longer fit their image? Please leave your story in the comments. If enough of us speak, maybe others will learn to back up what matters and who matters. Later that week, I sat down with my granddaughter. She's 12, sweet sharp, and still unfiltered. I asked her gently, "Did you like the new frame setup?" She blinked. "It's weird. It's like a dentist office now." Then she added, "Why aren't there any pictures of Grandpa anymore?" Before I could answer, my daughter-in-law walked in and said, "Because some things are meant to be let go of, honey." And just like that, my husband became some things. I started looking for the backup USB I once made just in case. I dug through drawers, closets, even the garage. It was gone. The drawer where I kept it had been organized last week. And then I found a post-it on the back of the drawer. In handwriting I didn't recognize. It said, "No old energy." That's when I stopped being shocked. I started being angry. But I didn't know then that deleting the photos was only the beginning. What came next would go far beyond the digital frame. The morning after I found that yellow post-it, the one that read, "No old energy," in deliberate all-caps handwriting, I began noticing the house had changed in more ways than I first realized. Not just the digital frame, not just the photos. The house itself was shifting around me as if rearranging its loyalty. My coffee mug, the one that said "World's Okayest Mum" in chipped purple letters, was missing from its usual spot. When I asked my daughter-in-law, said I thought that was junk. I donated it. My recliner, the one I'd sat in every morning to knit, was replaced with a meditation cushion and a hanging fern. The corner where I kept my knitting basket now had a salt lamp and a printed sign that read, "This is a drama-free zone." I was starting to see a pattern, not loud, not confrontational, but persistent, precise, chilling. And it wasn't just about furniture or photos. It was about presence or lack thereof. The first time I truly felt it, I was making lunch. I'd cut up apples and cheddar cubes just like I used to for my granddaughter. She came into the kitchen, but instead of sitting down like usual, she looked at her mom and hesitated. My daughter-in-law gave her a quick headshake, almost imperceptible, but I saw it. And then my granddaughter said, "Never mind, I'm not hungry," and left. Just like that. That same afternoon, I noticed the TV had been signed into a new Netflix profile. Not mine. Not my late husband's. Not even my granddaughter's. It was labeled Zen Vibes Only. All my saved shows were gone. replaced by documentaries on decluttering minimalist parenting and an oddly specific program titled Elder Energy Creating Space for the Future. I didn't ask. I just stood in the hallway holding the remote, staring at the new profile like it was an eviction notice. That week, my daughter-in-law started keeping the basement door closed more often. I lived in the converted basement guest suite, and while it wasn't glamorous, it had a small kitchenette and bathroom. It was meant to be temporary, but now the door at the top of the stairs was frequently shut. Not locked, just closed. One morning, I came up for breakfast and found a sign taped to the inside of the door. Please text. First sound carries. It was in a modern font, printed on recycled paper laminated. I hadn't been loud. I hadn't played music or even turned on the TV. But apparently my mere presence was now too noisy. So I started texting, coming up to get cereal, heading up to take a walk. May I use the oven today? Sometimes I didn't get a response. Sometimes I was met with silence. And when I opened the door anyway, I'd find her doing yoga in the living room earbuds, in pretending not to see me. I tried to find my voice gently. At dinner one night, a rare occasion when we all sat at the table, I said, I've noticed some changes around the house. Are we redecorating? My daughter-in-law replied, We're realigning, energetically. It's important to make space for what's coming. My son added, Yeah, Babe's been reading this book on environmental healing. It's about shifting ancestral tension out of the home. I wanted to ask, was I the tension, but I didn't, because deep down, I already knew the answer. Do you know what it feels like when people start designing around your absence? It's not always loud. It's not always cruel. Sometimes it's lavender-scented and pastel-colored, but it's still a slow erasure. Have you ever been made to feel like a relic in your own family, just by the way people rearrange things around you? If you have, please comment below. There's a language to this type of exclusion, and the more we decode it together, the less isolated others will feel. Then came the medications. I'd kept my pill organizer in the top kitchen cabinet, the one with the child lock latch, because of the baby. It had been there since I moved in, but one day it wasn't. When I asked, my daughter-in-law said, Oh, I moved those to your room. The baby's starting to grab now. Just being safe. That made sense. Except, she didn't tell me. I had gone 2 days without my blood pressure medication because I couldn't find them. When I retrieved the organizer, I noticed the days were scrambled. Thursday pills in Monday's slot. Evening pills swapped with morning ones. Accident? I asked her again. She said, Oh gosh, maybe they got jumbled during the move. Let me fix that. She poured the pills into a bowl and started reorganizing. I watched her fingers move quickly, confidently, too confidently. I said, Actually, I'll do it. I've got my own system. She smiled that same closed-lip smile and handed me the bowl. Of course, no judgment. But that night, I counted each pill, and from then on, I started logging them in a notebook. Next came the passwords. The Wi-Fi suddenly changed. When I asked for the new one, she said, We're limiting screen time for the whole family. It's part of our digital detox. My phone data was patchy in the basement, so I began going to the library more often. I'd tell her I'm heading out to do some work, though. What I was really doing was printing out old emails, saving family photos from social media, backing up whatever I could find. It felt like I was building a digital ark for the life I was about to lose. Then one afternoon, I returned from the library to find my room rearranged. Not wildly, just enough. My armchair had been angled toward the corner, away from the window. The lamp had been swapped with a Himalayan salt rock. A small whiteboard now sat by the kitchenette with a list titled Daily Harmony Reminders for Mum, Morning Stretches, Lemon Water, No more than 30 mins screen, no caffeine after 10 a.m., no sugar after 6 p.m., deep breathing before sleep. I hadn't written it. Neither had my son. I knew who had, and yet there was no discussion. No, would you like to try this? No, what helps you feel comfortable? Just a list. A whiteboard. like I was a new tenant in an Airbnb with house rules and silent consequences. It was around then that I realized I was losing access, not just to the upstairs kitchen or the remote control or my granddaughter's playroom, but to conversations, to influence, to presence. One evening, I came upstairs and heard my son and daughter-in-law talking in hushed tones. "She's been getting forgetful," my daughter-in-law said. "She asked about the mail twice today, and she left the freezer open last week." I hadn't. But even if I had, was that all it took to become the person they whisper about behind closed doors? I knocked softly and walked in. "Sorry I overheard. I actually didn't leave the freezer open. That was when the power flickered, remember? And I asked about the mail because I hadn't gotten the photo book yet." They both looked up, startled. She smiled. "Of course. It's okay. We all forget things." But the look in her eyes said, "You weren't supposed to hear that." That night, I looked through my drawer again. Inside was a small stack of note cards. I hadn't put them there. Each one had a different quote in looping calligraphy. "Don't let guilt tie you to the past. Sometimes detachment is the highest form of love. It's okay to move on from people who drain your spirit." I sat down. The lamp flickered. The air felt thin. And then I realized none of these quotes were about healing. They were about erasing me. Do you think control always comes with yelling or violence? Or do you believe, as I'm starting to, that sometimes the most dangerous kind of control comes with lavender oil and laminated quotes? Please leave a comment with your thoughts. Have you seen this form of quiet domination before, where your rights aren't taken with force, but with passive calmness? Let's share and name this together. I decided to test something. The next morning, I deliberately left the freezer open by a half-inch and turned off the oven light. Within 15 minutes, my daughter-in-law appeared at my door. "Hey, just a quick thing. I noticed the freezer again, and also the oven light. Just want to make sure everything's okay." Smiling, voice soft. But I saw the message behind the message. They were watching, not to help, to build a case. I began keeping notes. Not out of paranoia, out of preservation. Times, dates, quotes, incidents. I wasn't imagining it. And I wasn't going to be caught off guard again, because what I didn't know yet was that this wasn't just about energy, or photos, or even presence. This was the beginning of a plan that had already been put in motion, one that would soon leave me with no voice, no rights, and no legal footing in the home my husband and I built together. But I wasn't supposed to know that yet. The shift had started with the frame, then the mug, then the chair. But the most haunting part wasn't what was removed. It was what was no longer said. My world became quieter. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, but the kind where your name vanishes from sentences you used to be in. One morning, I overheard my granddaughter asking, "Is Grandma coming to my recital?" There was a pause, then my daughter-in-law's soft reply, "Let's keep it low-key this time. The space is really limited." I wasn't invited, not even told. I only found out because the program pamphlet had been left on the counter, still damp from coffee. When I asked my son, carefully calmly, he said, "Oh, I thought you knew." It was a last-minute thing. No anger, no apology, just a shrug, as though I was optional. I remember standing there, one hand on the faucet, wondering if this is how people slowly become ghosts, not by dying, but by being uninvited from the moments that matter. It wasn't just family events. I stopped getting texts from my friends. At first I thought it was coincidence people get busy, right? But then I found out that Liz, my best friend from church, had messaged me twice about the monthly tea group. I never saw them. Turns out my phone number had been accidentally changed in the group chat. I also wasn't receiving emails. Not from my senior circle. Not from the church bulletin. Not even the monthly newsletter I'd subscribed to for years. I later discovered that the family email filter managed by my daughter-in-law had been adjusted to minimize distractions. Apparently I was the distraction. The isolation wasn't just social, It was sensory. My favorite morning radio station had been reprogrammed. When I turned it on, instead of old jazz standards, it played nature sounds and affirmations. The kitchen calendar no longer listed my appointments, only family flow days, digital silence hours, and color-coded events that somehow never included my name. Even the fridge magnet board was scrubbed of my existence. My hand-drawn grocery lists, my scribbled sticky notes, replaced by printed meal plans with titles like Anti-Inflammatory Reset Week and Vision Board Planning Day. It was like living in someone else's Pinterest board, but I still tried to make myself useful. One Saturday morning, I woke early and made pancakes. Blueberry just like my granddaughter loved. I even added heart-shaped bananas on top. I set the table, poured orange juice, waited. They didn't come down. At noon, I knocked on their door. "I made breakfast," I said, trying to sound upbeat. From inside her voice, "Oh, sorry, we already ate. We did a smoothie bowl thing today." No thank you. No acknowledgement. Just a door between us, physical and symbolic. I stood there holding a hot pan that had gone cold hours ago, and I felt something break, not loudly, just a crack, like an old photo frame giving way at the corner. Have you ever been in a house full of people and still felt invisible? I don't mean ignored. I mean unseen. Where the people you love walk around you like you're furniture. Please, if you've experienced this kind of invisibility, especially from your own family, share it in the comments. I need to know I'm not the only one. It got to the point where I had to check in before entering shared spaces. One afternoon, I went upstairs to make tea, only to find a note on the kettle. Not for caffeine use. Please honor the detox window. It wasn't signed, but I knew who had written it. I returned to the basement and boiled water in a saucepan. Later, I found the box of Earl Grey in the trash, not just tossed, ripped open, soaked with dish soap, and thrown under food scraps. That was when I realized this wasn't just about space. It was about control. I began to doubt myself. Had I become forgetful? Had I become too needy, too opinionated? Was I really interrupting their flow? I started logging everything in a notebook. Times I entered the kitchen, things I said, food I touched, shows I watched, even bathroom usage. Not because I was paranoid, because I needed proof, even if only for myself, that I still existed. Then came the moment that changed everything. It was late evening. The house was quiet. I had come upstairs to grab a blanket, mine had gone missing. As I passed by the half-open nursery door, I heard voices, not talking, whispering. I paused, my daughter-in-law's voice. "She's more forgetful lately. Did you see the note she left? It made no sense." My son. "You think it's early signs? Her could be." I've been reading about cognitive fog in post-retirement women. It starts subtly. My son didn't answer. She added, "We might want to gently start tracking, just in case." And then I heard the sound of something clicking, perhaps a recording app turning off, or a laptop lid closing. I backed away from the door, careful not to make a sound. My hands were shaking. I wasn't forgetful. I was being framed. The next day, I tried to test the waters. I said something offhand at breakfast. "It's funny how I always remember the phone number of the house I grew up in, but now I forget where I put my tea." My daughter-in-law's eyes lit up. That happens. A lot of women your age experience executive function dips. Don't worry, we've got you. We've got you. What did that mean? Did it mean help, or did it mean documentation? I smiled. But that night, I counted every pill again, checked every cabinet, made backup copies of my notes, and hid them in 3 different places. The gaslighting wasn't wild. It was gentle. A dish placed somewhere else. A drawer left open. A quote tacked to my door about surrendering gracefully. It was in the way she'd say, "Didn't we already talk about this?" Or "You must have misunderstood." Or "I think you're projecting something from the past." I began to second-guess my memories. Then I began to record my conversations, just to be sure. One afternoon, I tried to call my cousin, someone who had known me since childhood. The call didn't go through. When I checked the contact list, her number was gone. Later that night, I asked my son if the phone settings had been changed. He looked confused. My daughter-in-law walked in and said I cleaned up your contacts list. There were so many old inactive ones. Don't worry, we have everyone important saved. Everyone important. That phrase kept echoing through me. I went to the mirror, looked into my own eyes, and I asked myself, had I become unimportant, or had I simply let myself be made to feel that way? Have you ever questioned your own memory, not because of aging, but because someone else wanted you to? If so, please share in the comments. I truly believe gaslighting thrives in silence. But if we tell our stories, we expose the patterns. That night, I went to bed early. I closed the door, turned off the lamp, and lay there in darkness. And then I heard something. Voices, muffled but urgent, in the kitchen above me. I got out of bed, slipped on my slippers, crept up the stairs slowly, careful not to make them creak. From the hallway, I could hear clearly now. We'll just say she volunteered. We'll make it sound like it was her idea. Will it hold up legally? If we phrase it right, yes. Especially if we get the doctor to agree. My breath caught in my throat. They were talking about me. But I wasn't ready to confront them. Not yet. Instead, I tiptoed back down, closed my notebook, and underlined one sentence I had written earlier that day. They are preparing something. I must prepare more. Because at that point, I still didn't know what they were planning. But I knew it would erase far more than just my photos. The days blurred. Not because I was confused, but because the house had gone quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't come from peace, but from a storm holding its breath. One Thursday morning, my daughter-in-law came downstairs to the basement, a rare occurrence. She held a piece of paper in her hand. Dr. Layton's office called, she said with a bright tone. He wants to do your annual checkup, and maybe a little cognition screening. Totally routine. I already made the appointment this Friday at 9:30. She smiled as she handed me the paper. But I wasn't looking at her smile. I was looking at the signature line. It wasn't from Dr. Layton. It was from a new name, Dr. Chase Miller, Behavioral and Cognitive Evaluations. Not my doctor, not my clinic. I looked up. This isn't my primary. She tilted her head. Dr. Layton referred you, and Dr. Miller has more geriatric focus. It's nothing serious. I stood frozen for a moment. My stomach curled. It wasn't a checkup. It was a test. I went to the appointment anyway. I had to know what they were preparing. The waiting room was beige and cold, filled with laminated brochures on declining decision-making in elders and how to talk to your loved one about assisted care. I hadn't brought anyone with me, but I noticed on the intake form that under primary contact, my daughter-in-law's name was written, not my son's. Her handwriting. I hadn't listed her. When they called me in, I kept my answers short, direct, and crystal clear. I didn't smile. I didn't babble. I didn't drift into memory lane. I stayed sharp, watchful. Dr. Miller was young, maybe 30, kind, but rehearsed. After 30 minutes of standardized questions, he finally said, "Has anyone expressed concern about your memory lately?" I paused. "Yes," I said. "But not because I'm forgetting, because I'm remembering things they'd rather I didn't." He blinked. I didn't elaborate. On the way out, the receptionist handed me a folder. It wasn't for me. It was labeled for Caregiver Early Intervention Packet. I opened it. Inside were pamphlets on power of attorney guardianship pathways and home transition checklists. And then I knew. They weren't just isolating me. They were preparing to legally replace me. That night, I didn't sleep. I pulled out my notebook, organized my entries, and began highlighting dates. I underlined every incident that could be twisted into incompetence, misplaced keys, a forgotten appointment, a double salt on the potatoes. Then I added context, electricity outage schedule conflict, and her controlling the calendar app. But it still wasn't enough. I needed proof. The next day I visited an old friend, Esther. She used to be our housekeeper, worked for us for almost 10 years before my daughter-in-law streamlined the staff. Esther now worked part-time at the dry cleaners near the community center. When she saw me, her eyes widened. "Mrs. Kimball," she said, dropping her register pen. "I was wondering how you were doing. You haven't responded to my messages." "What messages?" I asked. She pulled out her phone. She had texted me 5 times in the last 2 months. Invitations, check-ins, even a birthday note. I never saw them. I showed her my call log. Nothing. She stared, confused. "They must have blocked my number," she whispered. Then she hesitated and added, "You know, your daughter-in-law came in here once, maybe 6 weeks ago. Said she was cleaning up your wardrobe and asked about your dry cleaning records. Said you didn't need pickup notices anymore." My heart dropped. She even asked if we could forward any items to her address directly just to ease your stress. I asked, "Did you give her anything?" Esther looked guilty. "Only a blazer and a silk scarf." "They had your initials. I thought it was okay." I shook my head, stunned. I hadn't seen those items since. They'd vanished, like my frame, my voice, my image. Esther leaned forward. "Do you need help? Are you okay?" I didn't know how to answer that. So instead I whispered, "Would you be willing to write that down?" What she said, what she asked for. She nodded, no hesitation. That was the moment everything changed. Have you ever learned something that made everything else click into place? Something small but chilling that proved your worst suspicions weren't in your head? If so, I hope you'll share it in the comments. Because I promise you, someone out there needs to read it and know they're not going crazy. When I returned home, I found my bedroom door slightly ajar. My drawers had been opened. The notebook was no longer where I left it. I checked behind the books under the cushion. Gone. But I'd anticipated this. The real notebook was safe, hidden elsewhere. What she had found was the decoy filled with mundane entries about the weather and grocery items. Still, the message was clear. She was searching. So was I. That evening, I texted Esther. "Would you be open to talking to someone else about this? A professional?" She replied instantly, "Yes, whatever you need." I had my first witness. Then I called Sarah, an old colleague of my husband's, from his veterans group. She worked part-time with a local advocacy group for elder autonomy. I hadn't spoken to her in a while. But I told her what was happening carefully, without drama, just facts. There was a long pause on the line. Then she said, "You need to come in. Bring everything. Do not say anything to them yet." So I did. Have you ever had a moment where fear turns into clarity? Where you go from wondering if you're losing your grip to realizing someone's been pushing your fingers off the ledge? If you felt that shift, please share your story in the comments. It may help someone recognize their own moment before it's too late. Sarah listened to every word, reviewed my log, looked at the photos I'd printed from security cam stills I'd hidden in the living room, installed by a tech friend of Esther's days earlier. She flipped through Esther's written statement, frowning deeper with each page. Finally, she said, "They're building a competency case. It's classic. Slow erasure, subtle social shunning, then a cognitive evaluation with a doctor of their choice. Next will be a petition for guardianship or power of attorney, especially if property or assets are involved." My hands were cold. "But my name is still on the house." Sarah gave a tight smile. "We'll see. Bring me the deed, and any documents your husband left behind." I nodded. But as I stood to leave, she said one more thing. "And don't trust your memory alone. Record everything. Timestamp everything. From here on, every move you make must be documented like you're writing a legal defense." That night, I stood in the hallway again. Same place where I once overheard whispers. But this time I had my phone out, recording. My son and daughter-in-law were talking. "She's getting paranoid now," my daughter-in-law said. "Esther texted me she saw her today. My son's voice, I told you we pushed too fast. Her voice, sharper. We have to do this before she finds anything." The lawyer said 2 more incidents, and we'll have enough to start the paperwork. 2 more incidents, 2 more slips, 2 more false moments of confusion. 2 more traps. That was all they needed. But I wasn't going to give them anything else. Because starting now, I wasn't the frightened, invisible woman in the corner of their frame anymore. I was the one holding the camera. And I was ready to remember on my own terms. The line between suspicion and truth is thinner than most people realize. All it took was one printed email, one witness statement, and one overheard sentence, and suddenly the fog I had been living in cleared. The air wasn't better, but at least I could breathe. Because now I could name what was happening to me, coordinated erasure. But naming it wasn't enough. Now I needed proof, real proof, irrefutable. So I began building a case, not just emotionally, not just intuitively, but methodically. And I started with the doctor. On a Monday morning, I returned to Dr. Miller's office under the pretense of clarifying a billing issue. The receptionist, a bright-eyed 20-something, greeted me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I said I noticed something odd during my last visit. I was hoping to see the referral form, the one from Dr. Layton. She hesitated. Oh, I'm not sure if I can. I just need to confirm who authorized the transfer. For my records. She clicked around on her keyboard. Well, she said, squinting at the screen, it looks like the request didn't come from Dr. Layton directly. It was submitted through a shared account by… Here it is. A. Kimball, my daughter-in-law's name. I asked, can I get a copy of that for my insurance claim? She handed me a printout. And just like that, I had my first tangible document showing she had initiated a medical path without my consent using someone else's authority. That afternoon, I visited the county records office. I needed to see if anything had been filed, petitions, transfers, updates to the deed. I waited an hour. The clerk finally returned, flipping through a thin folder. Well, he said there was an inquiry last month regarding partial ownership rights. Nothing finalized. But a request for historical property documents was processed. That's public, of course. Who requested it? He tapped the top page. Kimball Ashley, Requester Relation Family Representative. Family representative. I was still alive, still standing, still feeding their child. But legally, she was already preparing to act as my voice. I asked for a certified copy, paid in cash. Then came the mailbox. For weeks I had thought it odd that I never saw mail for myself anymore. I assumed everything had gone digital. But then, while taking out the trash, I noticed a small stack of envelopes in the outdoor recycle bin. One had been torn in half, but I recognized it instantly, the quarterly statement from my life insurance provider. My name clearly visible with time-sensitive marked across the top. Another was a sealed letter from a senior legal planning agency. All of it trashed before it reached me. From that point on, I began checking the mail every day before anyone else. I noticed there were 2 deliveries, one to the main house, and a smaller set left on the side porch table, usually picked up quickly. I started photographing every envelope addressed to me. Within days, I caught it a letter addressed to Mrs. Kimberly J. Kimball Living Will Confirmation. Someone had requested a copy of my will. The return address, a legal office I'd never heard of. It was time to get someone else involved. I called Sarah, the elder advocacy contact from Part 4, and asked if she could help me hire a private paralegal. Someone discreet. She referred me to Darnell, older, quiet, meticulous, former investigator for the state bar. He didn't flinch at my story. Do you have recordings? He asked. I handed over the USB, 4 audio files, 1 video clip from the living room security cam. He listened silently. When the file ended, the one where my daughter-in-law whispered, "We just need 2 more incidents," he looked up and said, "That's conspiracy to establish incapacity. It's legally murky, but morally it's nuclear." He agreed to begin building a record, pulling title searches, verifying communications, contacting Dr. Layton's office for comparison. That night, I slept deeper than I had in months. Have you ever had to become your own detective? Not for revenge, but for survival. To prove you are still coherent, still capable, still here. If you've done that, if you've quietly built your own timeline because no one believed, you please share it in the comments. There's power in visibility. and your story may help someone build their own line of defense. But I wasn't just defending anymore. I was preparing to reclaim. I went through every drawer in the house where I used to keep things, recipes, photos, financial notes. One by one, I found subtle replacements. My late husband's handwritten recipes had been scanned, reprinted, and bound into a pastel blue family recipe book titled Nourish a Fresh Start. The introduction read, "Based on the traditions of Grandma Kimball, adapted and optimized for today's wellness lifestyle by Ashley." No mention of me as the author. No reference to my name. Just Grandma, a vague relic, stripped of identity. I flipped to the last page. A note in the margin, "Do not reference original source for cohesion." My throat tightened. Even my handwriting was now being rewritten. And then the real blow came. Darnell called. "I have something for you," he said. He sent over a scanned PDF. It was a draft petition for temporary guardianship. Not yet filed, but ready. Prepared in advance, with my name typed under subject and my daughter-in-law's name under petitioner. The justification: concern regarding progressive memory decline, increasing confusion, inability to manage financial affairs, and repeated disregard for family safety protocols. I laughed, actually laughed. Safety protocols. Was she referring to the Earl Grey tea? But my laughter didn't last long, because attached was an affidavit unsigned quoting multiple incidents. All twisted. An afternoon, I accidentally tripped over a yoga mat, became demonstrated impaired coordination. A misplaced grocery item became inability to manage shopping responsibilities. Even a comment I made about missing my husband's voice was listed as possible delusional thinking speaks to deceased frequently. They were building a prison cell out of my grief. That night, I stayed up documenting my full response to every listed incident. I labeled each one, cross-referenced audio, pulled timestamps. I wasn't writing a diary anymore. I was writing an affidavit of truth. Have you ever seen your life, your real, breathing life, rewritten by someone else, like a character in a file? Have you had to fight not just for your rights, but for your reality? If so, I'd be grateful if you shared your story in the comments, because we need to remind each other we exist, we remember, and we deserve to be the authors of our own lives. Then just when I thought I was gaining ground, she moved faster. It happened the next morning. I came upstairs and found my purse, always kept in the same cabinet, sitting open on the kitchen island. My ID was missing. Also gone my insurance card, my social security slip, and the copy of my husband's will I always kept folded in a side pocket. I rushed back to the basement. The fireproof lockbox was open. The key, which had been hidden in my slipper, was gone. Nothing else was disturbed. Just the folder labeled Personal Authority Originals. I froze, because now it wasn't just erasure, it was theft. Targeted, surgical, timed. She knew I was building something, and she had just tried to dismantle it. I called Sarah. She answered on the first ring. "Tell me everything." When I finished, she said that folder may already be in the hands of a lawyer. We need to act. But what I didn't know, what none of us knew, was that while I was tracking her, she had been tracking me too. People always assume malice comes with a sharp tongue or a cruel laugh or some dramatic slap in the face. But in truth, malice, real intentional malice, is quiet, strategic, patient, and sometimes necessary. My name is Ashley Kimball, and this is the story of how I began protecting my family from someone who used to be its matriarch. Let me be clear, I didn't marry into this family to destroy it. I married Daniel because he was the first man in my life who didn't make me feel like a burden. Not like my mother, who'd remind me monthly that I ruined her figure and inherited the wrong side of the family brains. Not like the high school boyfriends who dumped me when I couldn't pay for a prom dress. And certainly not like my father, who left without so much as a picture or a single dollar. Daniel saw me, the real me, and that included the ambition I never said out loud. I didn't want to live in survival mode anymore. I didn't want to always be figuring it out in my 30s, living check to check, taking whatever crumbs were offered by in-laws and church friends. I wanted structure, order, peace. And when Daniel and I moved into his childhood home after his father passed, I thought I had finally found it, until she moved in, Kimberly Jean Kimball, the woman who birthed my husband, and never let anyone forget it. She was charming to outsiders, to church folk, to cashiers. She had a certain kind of maternal elegance that made people instinctively trust her. But at home, she was persistent. Every time I adjusted the pantry, she restored it. Every holiday plan I made, she revised it. When I suggested switching to plant-based meals for the baby, she bought slabs of meat and said, "Don't worry, Grandma knows real nutrition." There's a kind of power play that older women do not, loud, not confrontational, but territorial. And every time she touched something I had arranged, it was like she was marking her territory again, like I would never be more than the girl who married in. It wasn't immediate. The resentment grew like mold in an unseen corner. It started with the digital frame. I had asked for one serene corner of the house. One. A minimalist reading nook, quiet, gentle, no clutter. But the frame kept flashing photos of dead relatives and birthday cakes from the 90s. Photos that made Daniel stare off for too long. That made my daughter ask why we didn't do real Thanksgivings anymore. I asked politely, could we update the slideshow? Make it more present? She nodded, but nothing changed. So yes, I deleted them, every image, every photo, and I replaced them with clean visuals, inspirational messages, peaceful aesthetics. Was that cruel? Or was it the first time in years I'd asserted control in my own home? People don't understand what it's like to live with a legacy that isn't yours. Kimberly would float around the kitchen like a queen without a title humming, rearranging, commenting on everything from baby food texture to Daniel's new tie. I asked him once, "Do you see what she's doing?" He said, "She's just helping. That's her way." And that's when I realized no one else was going to draw the boundary. So I would. I began with soft changes, feng shui adjustments, calendars shifted, meal plans digitized. I swapped her physical notebooks for virtual reminders she couldn't quite master. Every decision I made I could defend. It's for the baby, it's for our wellness, it's to reduce her burden. But really, it was to remind her I am no longer the girl asking for a seat at the table. I own the table now. Of course she noticed. She started writing things down, watching me, recording her pills, as if I'd tamper with them. It was almost insulting. I didn't want to harm her. I just wanted her to loosen her grip, to let the home evolve, to let us evolve. But she wouldn't, so I spoke with a lawyer. Not because I wanted a legal battle, but because I needed backup. What if something happened to her while watching the baby? What if her forgetfulness turned dangerous? Yes, I framed it that way in the affidavit drafts, but I meant every word. You can't wait for a tragedy before preparing for one. Have you ever taken control, not because you wanted power, but because no one else was brave enough to? Have you ever been painted as the villain simply because you were the first to say enough? I know this is controversial, but I'd like to hear your thoughts. Comment below if you've ever had to make a hard decision to protect your space, your peace, your future, even if it made you look like the bad guy. Let's talk about the cost of boundary setting. Here's something you don't know. The notebook I found in her drawer. The one filled with scribbles and timestamps. I read every page, and I recognized the desperation. But I also saw the framing. She was preparing her case, so I accelerated mine. I changed the locks, quietly. I rerouted her pharmacy alerts. I started using my maiden name when requesting documents to prevent suspicion. People think control comes with shouting, but real control comes with soft tones and notarized forms. I'll admit this, when I found out she had spoken to Esther, I panicked. I knew Esther liked her. I knew Esther would believe her. So I moved faster. Yes, I went through her purse. Yes, I removed the documents. Because by then it wasn't about removing a presence. It was about protecting what I'd built, what Daniel and I had fought for, what our daughter would inherit. You can hate me for it, but I won't apologize. Some people inherit power. Others take it. I still remember the first time I saw her as a threat, not a guest. It wasn't when she questioned the baby's food or rearranged the diaper drawer. It was when I heard her praying softly in the guest room and she said my name. Help Ashley see that control doesn't heal grief. That's when I realized she didn't see me as a woman protecting her family. She saw me as a girl acting out. And I knew then we could not coexist. So yes, I filed the petition. Yes, I called the elder care attorney. Yes, I prepared the 2 incidents. Because I will not be erased in my own home by someone clinging to a past that can no longer hold us. And if you think that's ruthless, just remember she's been preparing her counterattack too. But I'll finish this first, before she does anything at all. For a long time, I thought no one could see what was happening to me. Everything had been so calculated, so quiet, beach quotes instead of insults, recipe edits instead of slaps. My daughter-in-law had created a system of control so soft, so subtle, that it disappeared in the eyes of everyone inside the house. But sometimes it takes someone outside the frame to finally see what the picture really looks like. And for me, that person was the mailman. Yes, the mailman. His name was Jeremy, young maybe in his early 30s with a worn navy cap and an easy smile. He'd been on our route since just after my husband passed. I always waved to him from the porch in the early days. Then gradually I stopped going up at all. I stayed in the basement or slipped out through the back. But Jeremy still waved whenever he saw me. Until one afternoon after I began checking the side porch for mail, he stopped me as I reached for the stack. "You okay, Mrs. Kimball?" I blinked. Of course. "Why?" He hesitated, then said, "I just noticed someone else's name started showing up on forwarding requests for your address. Weird thing is, the requests are coming from inside the house." I froze. "What do you mean?" "Well, he said scratching the back of his neck, I got a digital update saying that mail for KJ Kimball should be held and that a new forwarding address would be sent soon. But it was all filed from your street address, not a different one. Filed from inside the house." He didn't know it, but Jeremy had just handed me a live wire. "Can you print that for me?" I asked quietly. He nodded. "I'll bring it tomorrow, off the record." And he did. The next morning, I opened a folded sheet of paper he'd tucked inside a piece of junk mail for privacy. On it was a screenshot of a USPS forwarding request. My name. My address. The reason listed owner entering transitional care facility. I hadn't requested anything. I hadn't gone anywhere. I was being relocated on paper. That same afternoon, I returned to the elder law advocate's office with Jeremy's printout. Sarah, the counselor I had been working with, stared at the paper. "This is significant," she said. "You now have proof that someone is attempting to reposition you legally while you are still mentally competent, mobile, and living in your own home." We compiled it into a larger folder: the unauthorized doctor appointment, the erased photos and speech quotes, the witness statements, the drafted guardianship documents, and now the mail redirection form. I was no longer the passive party in someone else's legal maneuvering. I was building a counterclaim. Have you ever had someone outside your life, a stranger, even say one thing that suddenly made all the shadows line up? It doesn't take a detective. Sometimes it takes the mailman, the librarian, the receptionist. If someone like that has ever changed your course, even unintentionally, I'd love to hear it. Share your story in the comments. You might remind someone else to pay attention to the unnoticed voices around them. But Jeremy wasn't the only unexpected witness. A week later, I received a call from a woman named Dina. She worked part-time as a notary for the same elder care law firm my daughter-in-law had visited. She'd seen my name on the petition draft, recognized it from the address, and in her words, something didn't sit right. "I remember you from years ago," she said. "You used to teach ceramics at the community center, right?" "Yes," I replied. She paused, then said, "Your daughter-in-law brought in a packet marked urgent incapacity filing." She was overly confident. But she stumbled when I asked whether the subject had already consented to guardianship assessment. She laughed and said, "Not yet, but she will soon enough." That didn't sound like someone advocating care. That sounded like someone making a move. I exhaled slowly. Dina continued. I'm willing to provide a sworn statement if necessary. I didn't feel right ignoring it. That night, I cried for the first time in months, not out of fear, out of relief, because for the first time in this war, I wasn't the only one who saw the battlefield. I called Esther, told her everything. She responded with 5 words I'll never forget. You're not fighting alone anymore. With Sarah's help, we drafted a formal preemptive petition, a legal statement asserting my full cognitive capacity, documented with evaluations from an independent doctor, supported by witness statements and timestamps of every action taken against me without consent. It wasn't revenge, it was a firewall. Have you ever felt the moment where the weight shifts, where you're no longer the hunted, but the one drawing the perimeter? That shift, subtle, powerful, changes everything. If you felt it, tell me in the comments. Let's name that turning point together. A few days later, Sarah handed me a binder with my name embossed on the cover. Inside, every recording, every notarized affidavit, every statement, email, and form, plus a legal counter-petition blocking any guardianship without court-ordered psychiatric evaluation. I want you to keep this somewhere secure, she said. If anything happens, if someone tries to file behind your back, this will speak louder than you can. For the first time in a long time, I felt not invisible. I felt protected, and I wasn't done. That evening, I sat in the kitchen and waited. Not in the basement, not in hiding. I sat at the head of the table, her table, and laid out the binder in front of me. When my daughter-in-law walked in, she stopped in the doorway. "Hi," she said too brightly. "What's all this?" I looked her dead in the eye. "This," I said calmly, "is everything you didn't think I was capable of remembering, or recording, or proving." Her smile twitched. She opened her mouth, but before she could say anything, I pushed the binder forward. "Here's the truth," I said. "Now you decide whether you want to keep escalating or retreat." She didn't answer. She left the room, and I knew she was scrambling, because now every move she made would be watched, documented, timed, and soon exposed. I was no longer the subject of her story. I was about to become the narrator. There's a moment, a pause in the air, when a room realizes it's not as safe, as polite, or as predictable as it thought. That moment came for my family on a Saturday afternoon in front of 30 people in our backyard, beneath strings of soft yellow lights. It was supposed to be a celebration of my granddaughter's 6th birthday, a simple garden party. Fairy wings, gluten-free cupcakes, kombucha in mason jars. My daughter-in-law planned it down to the lavender-scented bubbles and biodegradable utensils, and she did not want me there, but I came anyway. 3 days before the party, I found an email printed and folded in half in the kitchen trash. It was a message from Ashley to the party planner. The subject line read, "Revised guest flow excludes KJK. KJK Kimberly Jean Kimball." Me. She had excluded me from my own granddaughter's birthday party, using a euphemism, guest flow. She wrote, "It'll keep the vibe clearer. We're trying to avoid any confusion around legacy dynamics or old energy during this high-vibration event." I laughed, not out of humor, but out of something darker. Then I packed my bag. Inside, the binder Sarah gave me, 3 printed witness affidavits, audio files on a USB drive, a copy of the mail forwarding request, a notarized statement from Dina the notary, and a simple 4:6 framed photo, my husband holding our granddaughter in his lap, both laughing. The same photo Ashley deleted from the digital frame months ago. I wasn't going to cause a scene. I was going to correct a narrative. I arrived 10 minutes early. The lawn was already set, pastel streamers, ocean-themed party favors, vegan cupcakes shaped like shells. My son looked stunned to see me. My daughter-in-law frozen. "Hi, Mum," she said carefully, her voice sugar-wrapped steel. "We thought you might want to rest today." I smiled. I'm feeling more alert than I've been in years. Then I walked over and placed the photo frame on the main table next to the party favors. Silence. I turned and faced the guests. "Good afternoon," I said, my voice clear, steady. I know this day is about Lily, and I promise I won't take much time. But I believe it's important to honor the people who helped shape the reason we're celebrating. People shifted in their seats. Some looked at my daughter-in-law. She didn't move. I continued. This photo here, this was taken on Lily's first birthday. That day, my husband held her while she fell asleep on his chest. I know most of you never saw it because it was deleted from our family's digital memory. Murmurs began, quiet, curious. I pulled the binder from my bag, and I want to explain why. Not out of spite, but because sometimes silence is mistaken for weakness, and I have been silent too long. I clicked a small Bluetooth speaker I'd hidden under the tablecloth. Ashley's voice played out over the lawn. We just need 2 more incidents, and we'll have enough to start the paperwork. Gasps. Then the other clip, she's more forgetful lately. I'm adjusting her meds gradually. She won't notice. More gasps. Chairs creaked. Someone whispered, "Is that Ashley?" And then I spoke again. Over the past 8 months, I have been systematically removed from family decision-making memory archives and legal documentation. I have been surveilled, manipulated, and almost declared mentally unfit, not because I am, but because I was inconvenient. Ashley stepped forward, her face pale, her voice trembling. "Stop. This isn't the time or place." "It's exactly the time and place," I replied. "Because my erasure was happening here at this table, at this house, at this party. So this is where it ends." I opened the binder and handed it to my son. Inside, you'll find a complete record of everything I've just said. Witnesses, recordings, legal documentation. He didn't speak. He just looked down at the open pages. And for the first time since my husband's funeral, I saw shame in his eyes. Have you ever witnessed a moment like this, where a truth long buried erupts in public, where a family's polite silence cracks under the weight of what's been hidden? If you were in the crowd, who would you have stood with? I'm not asking to be vindicated. I'm asking because silence can be a side too. Leave a comment below. I want to know how you would have felt, what you would have done if this happened in front of you. The guests murmured some shifting uncomfortably. A few stepped away from the party tables. I heard one mother whisper to another, "That's elder abuse, right?" Ashley's hands were trembling. "You're twisting everything," she hissed. "You're weaponizing your role." I leaned in. "No," I said. "I'm reclaiming it." Then I turned to Lily, my granddaughter, and said, "Sweetheart, I hope you know how much you're loved. And I hope someday someone fights for your place in the world the way I'm fighting to keep mine." No one clapped. No one needed to, because I had said what needed to be said. And in that quiet, I felt something shift. Not in them, in me. For the first time in nearly a year, I felt like I was standing in my own skin again. Present, heard, human. But even as I packed up my things that afternoon, I knew one thing. This was not the end, because while my daughter-in-law's grip had loosened, she wasn't finished. Not yet, and neither was I. 3 days after the backyard confrontation, a letter arrived via certified mail. It was addressed to me formally legally, but the sender wasn't my daughter-in-law. It was from Henderson and Moore, LLP, a mid-sized estate and elder law firm in Sacramento, California. I sat at the kitchen table, the envelope trembling slightly in my hands, and opened it slowly. Inside, a formal notice of intent to petition for temporary conservatorship, citing California Probate Code. Sections 1800, 1823. Alleging that I, Kimberly Jean Kimball, may be suffering from progressive cognitive decline and may pose a threat to her own financial and emotional stability. Filed on behalf of the petitioner Ashley Kimball, the same woman who'd once hugged me on Mother's Day, the same woman who'd deleted my face from our family history. I stared at the words again and again. They weren't just false. They were tactical, and they were timed to come after the party when she assumed I'd be too emotionally rattled to respond quickly. But what she didn't know was that while she was filing a petition, I'd already retained counsel of my own. His name was Daniel Foster. a partner at a firm that specialized in contested conservatorship cases, and more importantly, someone Sarah from the Elder Advocacy Center had known for over a decade. We met in his office 2 hours after I received the letter. I laid out my binder. He didn't even blink. Instead, he flipped through the pages, the audio recordings, the testimony from Jeremy and Dina, the notarized calendar alterations, the printed emails, the documented medication tampering, and most importantly, the paper trail proving Ashley had begun modifying legal documents without power of attorney. When he finished reading, he looked up and said calmly, "Mrs. Kimball, she's made one crucial error." "What's that?" "She filed in California, a state with some of the strictest elder abuse protections in the country. And she filed before securing medical diagnosis or state-mandated third-party evaluation. That alone makes this vulnerable to dismissal." I blinked. "So she jumped the gun." "She jumped into a minefield," he replied. Then he leaned forward, tapped a page in my binder, and said the words that still ring in my ears. "She forgot you still had the pen." The legal response we filed was swift and surgical. It included a certified psychiatric evaluation from an independent court-recognized doctor, a declaration from my personal physician, Dr. Layton, witness statements from Jeremy the mailman, Dina, the notary, and Esther, the housekeeper, time-stamped surveillance logs and voice recordings from within the home, and an addendum citing California Welfare and Institutions Code, paragraph 15610.07, which defines elder abuse to include isolation, financial manipulation, and psychological coercion by family members. It was a wall of evidence, and it didn't just defend me, it accused her. The hearing was scheduled for the following Friday at the Sacramento County Probate Court. Ashley came in wearing a navy blazer, holding a pink notebook labeled Healing Through Transition. I came in with Daniel Foster and a file box labeled Proof of Presence. She smiled at the judge. I didn't smile at all. The judge was a woman in her 60s, stern, sharp-eyed with silver hair, and a tone that suggested she'd seen more families unravel than most therapists combined. Ashley's attorney began with the claim that I had demonstrated signs of cognitive decline and confusion, citing testimony from family members and minor incidents like medication mix-ups and social withdrawal. Then came the phrase that nearly made me laugh. Her energy has shifted in ways that concern the family's emotional safety. The judge raised an eyebrow. Then it was our turn. Daniel Foster stood calmly, opened our file, and began with one sentence. "Your Honor, not only is Ms. Kimball fully competent, she is the target of a slow, coordinated attempt to erase her legal agency and emotional role in her family." He laid out the timeline. Every detail, every deleted file, every harmless change to the house, every attempt to shift mail, modify her digital presence, and quietly reroute her legal standing, all without medical basis, state oversight, or even the courtesy of consent. He cited California Probate Code, paragraph 1801, specifically the legal requirement that a conservatorship must be the least restrictive alternative, and that functional capacity must be proved through qualified medical testimony. Then he played the recording, the one where Ashley whispered, "We just need 2 more incidents, and we'll have enough to start the paperwork." The judge's face didn't change, but she wrote something down. Slowly, firmly. Finally, Daniel said, "What we are seeing is not concern, it is coercion. It is not protection, it is preemption. And if this court allows even 1 more inch of erosion to Ms. Kimball's autonomy, it sets a dangerous precedent for every elder in this state who lives with family members more interested in inheritance than integrity." Then he turned to me, nodded, and I spoke. "I'm not asking for anyone to be punished. I'm asking to be restored, to be heard, to be allowed the basic dignity of owning my name, my photos, my memories, and my legal status." The room was silent. Even Ashley stopped taking notes. The judge looked at her, then at me. Then she said, "The petition for temporary conservatorship is denied in full. Furthermore, I am ordering a formal review of possible financial coercion under the California Elder Abuse Act. This court will not serve as a weapon for family infighting masked as caretaking. Ashley's face crumbled, not into tears, but into calculation. You could see her recalculating her next move in real time, but there were none left. Outside the courthouse, Daniel handed me back the binder. "You did it," he said. I shook my head. "No," I replied. "I didn't win anything. I just got back what was already mine." Have you ever seen a legal system truly work in someone's favor, not because they had money or power, but because they had truth? Do you think what happened here was justice, or just a temporary shield? Please comment below. I'd like to hear your thoughts, especially if you've been part of a guardianship or power of attorney dispute. That night I returned home. I walked into the living room. The digital frame was back on the console table, and for the first time in nearly a year, it was showing my husband's face again. But I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just stood there, still, breathing. Because for all the fighting, all the gaslighting, all the paperwork and whispers and smiling knives, what I wanted most was something much simpler. I just wanted to be me again. It's been 4 months since the court hearing. 4 months since I stood before a judge and proved that I still had a voice. 4 months since I reclaimed my name, my autonomy, and something far quieter, my dignity. A lot has changed, but not in the ways you might expect. I didn't throw anyone out of the house. I didn't press criminal charges. I didn't post a single angry message online. Because power, real power, isn't in revenge. It's in refusing to let someone else shape the ending of your story. The digital frame still sits in the living room. It plays again quietly, respectfully, not just the old photos of my husband and me, but new ones too. A trip I took to Mendocino by myself. A photo of me holding Lily's hand at the botanical garden. A snapshot of me in front of a small community center under a sign that says Memoir Writing Workshop, hosted by Kimberly J. Kimball. Yes, I started teaching again. Once a week, I meet with a circle of women over 60. Some have been pushed aside like I was. Others are just now discovering how much life they have left. Together, we write stories that our children never asked for and that we're no longer waiting for permission to tell. It's not about legacy, it's about visibility. Ashley still lives here. That surprises most people when they find out. But here's the truth: I didn't want to fracture the family more than it already had been. I made it clear, legally, emotionally, and spatially, that I would not be erased again. And she changed. Not dramatically, not instantly, but enough. She asks before moving things now. She leaves my mail untouched. She even signed up for a Repairing Generational Ties workshop and invited me to join. I said I'd think about it. My son has apologized. He's not good at words, but he's shown up in his own way, fixing the garden bench I used to sit on, texting me midweek just to say, "Thinking of you," and quietly helping me digitize the old family videos. One afternoon, he looked at a clip of me from 20 years ago, dancing in the kitchen with his father, and whispered, "I don't know how I let her make me forget who you are." I didn't reply. I just squeezed his hand. Some things don't need words to be forgiven. They just need presence. Have you ever seen someone rise not with fire, but with stillness? Not by dominating, but by quietly insisting on their worth. If you have, tell me their story in the comments. Let's create a space where grace is celebrated just as much as grit, where coming back to yourself is the biggest victory of all. Last week, Lily asked if I would help her with a school project, portraits of people who inspire us. She drew a picture of me with a pen in my hand, standing at the front of a classroom, and beneath it, in her uneven handwriting, she wrote, "This is my grandma." They tried to quiet her, but she wrote her truth louder. I didn't cry. I smiled. Because that's what I've become. Not a warning, not a footnote, not a woman someone tried to delete, but a sentence that refuses to end mid-story. If you've followed this journey until now, thank you, truly. Your presence, even through a screen, is part of the reason I kept going. And if you'd like to keep hearing stories like this, true, raw, emotional, and quietly powerful, don't forget to hit subscribe. There are still so many voices waiting to be heard. Some of them may be yours.